Here we go in round 1. We are on the draw with only 2 lands, but we have quite a lot of cards we can cast depending on what Evolving Wilds gets us. And we also have some nice late game. I think we can keep. I think we don't mulligan a 2-lander on the draw with the deck we've built. 18 lands and 2 Prophetic Prisms is a lot of mana sources, and I kind of like the potential of this hand, so I'm not going to mulligan. We have to keep in mind that we are also red, so our mana definitely isn't perfect. So there's a mountain. We have the Oust to play with the plains, so I'm going to delay the Evolving Wilds until I know which of these I want. Let's play the plains so that if we want to oust something, we have the option to. On the other hand, it's not really a great play to oust an early creature. You want to save it for generating some additional value, basically. So this turns into an 0/6 and then a 6/6 with Island Walk, which we have to keep in mind if we ever fetch our island, which we aren't really in a hurry to do. I'm going to play Evolving Wilds so that I can get the swamp if I want to. Because now that we have Vendetta and Balaget Scorpion, it's definitely more interesting to get the swamp out of our deck. Donga Invoker is a pretty powerful card. So I think what we want to do here is just Vendetta the Invoker to not take any damage from it, and that gives us the swamp for the Scorpion as well. I'm going to wait on the Vendetta. If our opponent has a Totem Armor and decides to play it on the Invoker, I can get him in a way. It's unlikely, but I think there is a very little risk in doing it that way, so. Okay, he has an Eel Umbra, which is kind of unfortunate. Now, what Vendetta is going to do, it destroys the Eel Umbra, and then we take 1 because the toughness of the Donga Invoker is 1, and then we take 2 from the Invoker. And Soul's Attendant is basically a mulligan, and it would be great if we could draw land here. Prophetic Prism is somewhat close to a land. So let's see. We drew a Forkbolt. Now that's insane. So we just Forkbolt these 2, generating red with Prophetic Prism, and pass the turn. So yeah, we did trade Vendetta for Eel Umbra, but I'm actually not too unhappy about that. I think getting that out of his hand and then, well, top decking Forkbolt was actually pretty good. This is basically just a defender, so it's another card that doesn't really do much against us. I'm just going to run out my cards. We have more than enough solutions in our hand, and we just want to make sure that things progress nicely here. Opponent could be sitting on something here, maybe a counter spell or something, but just like last turn, we are interested in getting our cards on the battlefield. So even if he has the 4-mana counter spell, for example, that forces us to reveal our hand, we don't want that counter spell to potentially get our better cards like Eldrazi Conscription. Even Akum Boulderfoot is more important to us than Totem Guard Heartbeast at this point. Although getting Splinter Twin would be absolutely huge. Okay, looks like we can proceed with that. We already have an Narcolepsy, and Splinter Twin has a lot more potential, which should be obvious. Opponent doesn't have anything to do, and now if he ever decides to tap out, then we can punish him with Splinter Twin. Prophetic Prism is interesting. Don't know if we want to do that before combat. Balaget Scorpion would run into Guard Gamazoa teaming up with Afha Guardhound. but that's probably worth it. On the other hand, no, I'm just not going to attack. As long as our opponent doesn't do anything, I think we are highly favored to win this game. And he might be sitting on something, but the Splinter Twin we've already shown him is putting up a huge amount of pressure. So by just not casting it, we are just threatening to punish him for anything he might be planning on doing. There's some cards that could be really good here. For example, the Recurring Insight we passed. If our opponent has a land and then gets to draw 5 cards of the Recurring Insight, and that has Rebound as well, that would be pretty good. But other than that, I can't really think of cards that he could have in his main deck that absolutely demolish us. And we are safe from any creature, which is the important part. Okay, it looks like our opponent is just content on not really doing anything. So let's see if we are allowed to deal 2 damage here. There's also Smite in the format, so that's not completely irrelevant. There is long pauses whenever we try to resolve something, so that usually means that our opponent is holding some form of counterspell, but so far none of our cards has prompted him to do that. Knight of Cliffhaven comes down, but opponent can't afford to level it. So let's see. All this does probably not the card that we want here. We could oust something and then just get in for a pretty large amount of damage. Problem is, if we ever attack and then cast Splinter Twin, then we can't really make good use of it. So what we could just do is Splinter Twin the Heart Beast, and then even if he has a regress to punish us, then it's actually not that bad. I kind of like ousting the Guard Komazawa just to get in for more damage. So let's see how he reacts to that. Okay, time to get in for some damage. And there is no reason to Narcolepsy, Knight of Cliffhaven. It's not even a threat on this board. So now it has gotten a bit better. A 3/3 with another of these Eel Umbras. We definitely have to keep the Eel Umbras in mind. They have been quite nice against us. I'm going to Narcolepsy this thing. Don't really want to face that. I could Splinter Twin now, but our opponent is going to be forced to do something here, and then we can still decide if we want to Splinter Twin or not. It's more likely that we actually want to Eldrazi Conscription, but our opponent has already seen enough, so yeah, that was actually quite an easy game after the early stages were over. It's important that we have the one damage spells, but we have to be a little more careful about the Eel Umbra he has shown. Could bring in Demystify, but I don't think that's necessary because our deck has so many ways to deal with the Umbras that it's not really a big deal. Kind of like Wrap in Flames, because he has shown Dawnglare Invoker and the 1/1 that gains life, and pretty sure that have to be other 1 toughness creatures in his deck as well. So maybe Keating Stone isn't the right card to have here, because we are almost guaranteed to have a better late game than him. So Keating Stone for Wrap in Flames looks like a good way to have one more card to stop his early beatdown. And Demystify, like I said, I don't think it's all that amazing, so I'm going to keep it like this. Okay, we are on an island draw. We have 3 of our 4 colors. Totem Guide Heartbeast isn't supported yet, and Mnemonic Wall is missing an instant or sorcery, but I still like this hand. I think having 4 lands in 3 different colors with our sweet control deck is probably just reason enough. And Narcolepsy has shown to be very good against him. I'm going to wait on the island to not show him that his Island Walker is going to be efficient. And now we are already facing an interesting decision. If we Narcolepsy the Knight of Cliffhaven, it's basically dealt with. However, if our opponent decides for whatever reason that he wants to spend 3 mana next turn, then we get a little more value out of the Narcolepsy that way. On the other hand, if our opponent has a 2 or 3 drop, he's going to play that instead of leveling up Knight of Cliffhaven. That's just a very, well, it's just pretty obvious. So I think preventing more damage here is what our deck wants more. Or in another way to phrase it is, if our opponent spends 3 mana here to level up, then his alternative turn looks like this with no play at all. So we haven't really, well, we've just gained something by Narcolepsying here. It's interesting that our opponent didn't level up the Knight anyway, which wouldn't have been a bad play. You can just level up a creature with Narcolepsy, and who knows, maybe the Narcolepsy is going to fall off for some reason or the other, or you are able to bounce Narcolepsy and swing for the win. By not doing so, our opponent is representing some kind of instant, but doesn't look like he's on much so far. Prophetic Prism is a great draw, enabling the Heartbeast and also drawing us into more spells. Opponent doesn't really have much after the Knight, so all his dust could really be great. And here we have our opponent representing Deprive. The cost is to return a land to your hand, and then you can counter any spell. So that might just be the card that our opponent is on. Now, the big question is there any card that we want to have countered by Deprive? Well, it's definitely not the Heartbeast, and we can't really play Mnemonic Wall on this board. So there is Mtgo, but we definitely don't want to get that countered, have that countered. Tuk, similarly, we also don't want countered. So I'm just going to pass the turn. If our opponent wants to wait and not play anything, I think that our superior late game is going to be able to get things done for us. And Evolving Wilds is also nice. So here I'm just going to play Draw Go, and at some point we can hopefully overload his his counter spells. Or just bait him into countering something that we don't really care about all that much. Prophetic Prism is kind of nice with Magma as well. We can just sacrifice that once our mana is fixed. And if we get... We have some insane combos here, potentially. Putting Splinter Twin, searched up by Totem Guide Heartbeast on Mnemonic Wall, and then sacrificing the wall with Magma every time we make a copy. Okay, this should turn into a 4/4 pretty soon, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. This is also an interesting card. It's definitely not bad, but still too good to let it be countered, I think. Now the card I don't really worry about too much is the Tuk Tuk at this point, but I've decided to pass the turn once more. Like I said, as long as our opponent isn't really doing anything, I think we can afford to do that. And then at some point we are going to see him cast something like this Dawnglare Invoker, and he's putting Hyena Umbra on it, so he has a 3/2 first striker, which is fine. And that does make our Boulderfoot worthless. So now we fully expect our opponent to have a removal spell here. What we could do is just cast All Is Dust, because it does deal with both of these and also makes the Knight of Cliffhaven go away. We are only taking 3 each turn, but All Is Dust is probably the only card that can convince our opponent to play his counter spell, and that allows us to Mnemonic Wall All Is Dust back, and then Wrath his board that has potentially even grown a little bit. So even though I'm offering up a mass removal here, I think we are getting sufficient value whether or not it resolves. Then there's the Deprive I talked about. Basically it's just counter target spell at this stage of the game. Now the question is, how much does our opponent commit to the board now? He just puts on more and more Umbras on his creature. So hitting for 6 here is definitely a pretty big deal. Now we can Totem Guide Heartbeast another Narcolepsy, and that seems even better than... Well, there's a problem with the Dawnglare Invoker, it just taps everything we have, but taking another 6 here seems kind of dangerous. If our opponent has another counterspell, then we are in trouble anyway, so I'm going to try to prevent as much damage as possible here. Okay, looks like that worked out, and like I said, I'm going to play this really defensively, because I think that our late game is just insane. So making sure that we don't take any damage here has to be a good idea. Now, at some point, if our opponent has another creature, then the 8 mana from Dawnglare Invoker tap everything we have, and then we need to start worrying about that. But so far, I'm feeling pretty good about this game. Getting down that Magma should make it possible to just deal with most creatures our opponent plays, and I didn't really think this through. I should have played Tuk Tuk before combat and attacked with it, but that's fine. Now, this is going to be a little bit weird. We've now committed a few permanents to the board, and our opponent has the 8 mana that he needs to just keep all of them tapped. But I have a feeling that we can probably just sit this out without any risk of dying here. The only question is, how long do we want to play this game, really? So one thing we could do here after this resolves is sacrificing. Oh no, it actually doesn't have haste, so scrap that. So like I said, we don't deal damage here, and we can get back all his dust, which we might just be forced to cast, but want to have as a backup anyway. And it's important to note that all his dust gets around all these Umbras. Okay, this is also nice. So we see our opponent activating the Invoker again. Everything of us gets tapped, we don't attack, and then we oust the Donga Invoker so that the play our opponent just had isn't available to him anymore. I'm going to leave open Magma and not commit anything else to the board, because our opponent is going to need some pretty powerful cards to get out of the position he's in. So this is Guard Gomazoa, which dies to Balagat Scorpion. And that's Champion's Drake, which is basically a 4/4. Now let's see, we could just Magma the Guard Gomazoa, but we're going to Balagat Scorpion it. The thing is that we kind of want to sacrifice Tuk Tuk to Magma to have another 5/5 attacker. So that would give us 1 damage to the Gomazoa for free in a certain way, and of course we have Prophetic Prism, which we could sacrifice as well. The question is if we are willing to get rid of some of Mnemonic Wall in addition to that. I think we are. I think that's sufficiently good. That means we can just hold back Balagat Scorpion. Okay, this is also pretty cool. So yeah, we have more than what we need here. Basically, I don't think our opponent has any chance to win this. I'm going to try to Vendetta Knight of Cliffhaven, taking 4 in the process, but turning Champion's Drake into a 4/4. Okay, Ilambra is kind of unfortunate, but yeah, that's life. Now, Magma does trade with Champion's Drake, which is kind of unfortunate, but I'm going to have to let that resolve. At least our opponent didn't have 2 Ilambras. Maybe if we had thought about this more, we would have realized that Ilambra was a very relevant card that our opponent could have in hand. Now, no 11th land from our opponent means that Donga Invoker isn't going to be activated, so we can just try to play the Boulder Foot here. Okay, our opponent wasn't tricky to hold back. Another Ilumbra here, and now there shouldn't be too many cards left that could beat us. Okay, yeah, we beat White Brew Levelers with our sweet red, blue, white, black control deck. With well, we had everything. We kind of didn't maximize the value of every single card, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't take too much damage. So putting the Narcolepsy on the Donga Invoker, I think, was correct, rather than taking another 6 and hoping that all this dust resolves. And then we could kind of play a game where we were winning on board, but also had the option to still reset everything and have ample removal left in our hand. And of course, our deck is drawing towards Eldrazi Conscription and Splendor Twin as well. So yeah, that was a great showing. Let's hope that we can win the next round as well. See you then.